They didn't knock. They didn't call. They just parked a black SUV at the edge of my field. Engine idling, binoculars pressed to the window. Like my quiet farm had suddenly become a crime scene. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an HOA trying to claim power where it had none, and they had no idea how badly they'd miscalculated. My farm sits on 10 acres of inherited land, surrounded by fences older than the nearest subdivision. I don't have manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, or pastel-colored bylaws taped to my fridge. I have soil under my boots, animals to feed before sunrise, and property lines drawn by deeds, not opinions. The nearest HOA neighborhood is half a mile away, separated by woods and a county road. I've never signed anything with them. I've never attended a meeting. I've never paid a dime, so when a security patrol SUV rolled up one Tuesday afternoon, I assumed it was lost. I waved, expecting a sheepish U-turn. Instead, the driver raised a phone and started recording. He slowly cruised along my fence, narrating into a headset, pointing at my barn, my tractor, my stacked firewood. That's when my stomach dropped. This wasn't curiosity. This was surveillance. I approached the fence and asked who he was. He smiled the way people do when they think rules are on their side. He said he was contracted by the HOA to observe potential violations affecting community standards. I laughed, because it sounded ridiculous. Then he said the words that changed everything. You're adjacent, so you fall under our area of concern. Area of concern, not jurisdiction. Not authority, just concern. Apparently, that was enough for them to spy. Over the next week, the SUV came back. Different times, different drivers, always watching. I started documenting everything. Dates, plates, photos. Neighbors driving past slowed down, confused. My animals were spooked. My privacy was gone. And still, the HOA insisted they were allowed. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought a farmer wouldn't fight paperwork with paperwork. They were wrong. That night, I reviewed my deed. County maps and tax records, highlighting boundaries with a marker. I pulled public contracts, learned the patrol company's name, and read complaints online from others harassed the same way. Patterns emerged. Intimidation first, fines later, compliance through confusion. I realized the story wasn't just mine. It was a playbook, and if they were bold enough to spy openly, they were confident no one would push back. That confidence would become their mistake, because I decided to respond calmly, legally and loudly, starting the next morning. I slept little, rehearsing conversations, documenting facts, and preparing escalation. The next morning, the SUV returned right on schedule, as if my farm had been added to a checklist. I was ready this time. Camera charged, notebook in my pocket, county map folded like a weapon. When the patrol vehicle stopped near my gate, I didn't wave. I waited. The driver stepped out wearing a polo, with the HOA's contracted security logo stitched proudly on the chest. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. He already acted like he belonged. He told me he was following up on previous observations and needed to verify ongoing activity on my property. I asked him to explain slowly why an HOA patrol was standing on land that wasn't governed by any HOA. He repeated the same rehearsed line about adjacent influence and visual impact on the community. I asked for documentation. He said it wasn't necessary. I asked for the specific bylaw granting authority over non-member land. He shifted his weight and said he didn't have that information. That was the moment I realized he was just a messenger, sent out with confidence but no substance. I informed him he was trespassing. Calmly, clearly, I pointed to the posted signs on my gate. Private property. No unauthorized access. I told him future visits would be documented and escalated. He nodded, stepped back, and returned to the SUV. Instead of leaving, he parked again, engine running, camera still rolling. It was intimidation by presence, and they wanted me to blink first. By noon, I had made calls. County zoning confirmed in writing that my farm was not subject to any HOA rules. The assessor's office emailed maps showing clean boundaries. I contacted the patrol company directly and requested their contract scope. They told me to speak to the HOA board, so I did. The HOA president answered like she'd been waiting. She said the patrol was preventative. She said my farm activities might lower surrounding property values. When I told her I wasn't in the HOA, she didn't deny it. She simply said, "We still need to monitor." That was the moment the tone changed. Monitoring became harassment. Prevention became overreach. I sent a certified letter that afternoon, demanding they cease surveillance immediately. I attached county confirmation, maps, and a formal notice of no consent. I copied the patrol company. I copied the county sheriff's office. That evening, another SUV drove by, slower than before, headlights lingering. They were testing me. seeing how far they could go before consequences appeared. I stood by the fence, recording, saying nothing. Silence, I learned, can be louder than shouting when it's backed by evidence. Inside, I organized everything into folders, photos, emails, names, dates. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. HOAs thrive on confusion and fear. I was about to remove both, and they didn't yet realize the next move wouldn't come from me directly. 2 days later, the letter changed everything. It wasn't from the HOA. It wasn't from the patrol company either. It came from a law firm whose name I recognized instantly, the kind that represents boards, developers, and organizations that assume intimidation will save them time. The envelope was thick. The tone inside was confident. They claimed the HOA had a legitimate interest in observing my property due to potential covenant interference. In plain language, they were doubling down. They demanded I stop obstructing security operations and accused me of being hostile to contracted personnel. They cited community safety, aesthetics, and vague references to nuisance law. What they didn't include was a single statute, ordinance, or contract giving them authority over my land. It was a bluff dressed up as legal muscle. Instead of replying emotionally, I did something better. I filed a public records request with the county for any agreement between the HOA and local authorities. There was none. I requested zoning complaints, filed against my property. 0. I requested permits or variances associated with my land. All clean. The more I looked, the clearer it became. This HOA had no legal path forward, so they were trying to create pressure instead. Meanwhile, the patrol visits escalated. They began parking closer to my entrance. One driver walked the fence line with a clipboard, stopping to take notes. Another drone flew overhead for less than a minute before retreating. That was the line. I called the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, the patrol SUV suddenly found somewhere else to be. I showed the deputy everything. Deed, maps, letters, videos. He listened carefully and confirmed what I already knew. They had no jurisdiction. He logged the incident anyway, noting repeated surveillance and potential harassment. That report would matter later. That night, I responded to the law firm. 1 page, calm, precise. I stated I was not a member of the HOA, had never consented to observation, and that continued surveillance constituted harassment and trespass. I cited the deputy's report number. I demanded all monitoring cease immediately, and warned that future contact would be treated as intentional interference. The next day was quiet. No SUV, no drone, no slow drive-bys. For the first time in weeks, the farm felt like mine again. I worked the fields, fed the animals, and almost believed it was over. Almost. At sunset, my phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject line, notice of board action. The HOA had voted on something involving my property. Despite having no authority to do so, they weren't backing off. They were preparing a new angle, and this one aimed straight at the county. The email was carefully worded, the kind designed to sound official enough that most people would panic before questioning it. The HOA board claimed they had voted to formally notify the county about alleged safety and environmental concerns originating from my farm. No fines yet, no demands, just a warning that authorities would soon be made aware. It was a pressure tactic, hoping I'd rush to negotiate or concede. Instead, I smiled. Within 48 hours, the county inspector arrived. Not aggressive, not suspicious, just professional. He explained that an HOA had filed a complaint alleging improper land use, unpermitted structures, and potential runoff issues. I handed him my folder without a word. Permits, soil management plans, agricultural exemptions, photographs dated years back. He took one look and nodded. This wasn't his first HOA complaint. It was just the most obvious overreach he'd seen in a while. He walked the property with me, took notes, and pointed out how clearly marked my boundaries were. He confirmed, on record, that my farm complied with all county regulations and that the HOA had no standing. Before leaving, he told me something important. If they keep filing baseless complaints, that becomes a problem for them, not you. That was the opening I needed. I filed a formal harassment complaint with the county, attaching the inspection report, the deputy's log, and copies of the HOA's communications. I also sent a cease and desist letter, this time drafted with the help of a legal aid attorney who specialized in property disputes. It wasn't flashy. It was factual. It outlined a clear pattern: surveillance, intimidation, false reporting. It demanded an immediate stop and warned of civil action. 3 days later, the patrol company terminated its contract with the HOA. I found out because one of their supervisors called to apologize. He admitted they'd been told I was part of the community and only realized The truth, after receiving my documentation and the sheriff's report, they wanted nothing more to do with it. The HOA, however, wasn't done embarrassing itself. At the next county meeting, their president tried to argue that my farm affected community harmony. She was shut down publicly. The chair reminded her that private organizations do not govern land, they do not own or control. It was quiet, final, recorded. After that, the SUVs vanished. The emails stopped. The stares from across the road ended. What replaced them was something better. Clarity. Neighbors who had watched silently began waving again. A few even stopped to apologize for not speaking up sooner. The HOA never admitted wrongdoing. They never apologized. They just retreated, hoping the whole thing would fade. For me, it didn't. It became proof that knowing your rights matters, especially when someone counts on you not knowing them. Weeks passed, and the farm settled back into its old rhythm. Mornings smelled like damp soil again instead of exhaust. Evenings were quiet, uninterrupted by idling engines or hovering drones. On the surface, it looked like the story was over. But the real ending wasn't about silence. It was about what remained after the noise stopped. I started getting messages from people I didn't know. Nearby landowners, small farmers, even a couple of homeowners inside that same HOA. They had heard what happened and wanted details. Some had experienced similar intimidation but never pushed back. Others were afraid to, convinced the HOA's authority extended far beyond reality. My situation became a reference point, proof that those boundaries were not imaginary. One family told me their HOA had threatened fines over a vegetable garden that was fully permitted. Another said patrol vehicles routinely photographed their backyard for records. None of it had ever felt right to them. But fear had kept them quiet. Fear, I realized, was the real tool being used. Surveillance wasn't about enforcement. It was about conditioning people to accept oversight without question. I shared everything I'd learned. Deeds matter. County records matter. Verbal authority means nothing without jurisdiction. And most importantly, calm documentation beats emotional reaction every time. Once people understand that, the power dynamic flips fast. A month later, the county quietly updated its public guidance, clarifying that HOAs have zero authority over non-member properties and warning against filing frivolous complaints. No announcement, no press release. Just a line added to the website. It was enough. The message reached the people who needed it. As for the HOA, they became cautious. Too cautious. Their board meetings grew tense. Membership attendance dropped. When control fails publicly, confidence erodes privately. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't need to. The goal was never revenge. It was boundaries. Standing at the edge of my field one evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I thought about how easily this could have gone differently. If I'd ignored it. If I'd panicked. If I'd assumed they knew better than I did. Overreach thrives on silence. It survives on uncertainty. It collapses under clarity. My farm is still just a farm. No gates, no guards, no patrols. Just land, work, and the understanding that ownership means something only if you're willing to defend it the right way. They tried to watch me, to pressure me into submission, to blur lines that were legally sharp. Instead, they taught me something valuable. Power doesn't come from pretending authority exists. It comes from knowing exactly where it ends and standing there without moving.